Okay. Should I just put...
Yes.
Yes. Good morning, everyone. Can you see and hear me?
Yes.
Perfect. So I will also share my screen. Yes, perfect. Can you see my presentation?
We can, Carina. Thank you.
Thank you. So first of all, thank you so much for having me. I'm excited to be here. Thank you also for the very nice introductory words. I also briefly want to introduce myself. So originally, as already said, I am a lawyer by training and a human rights expert, and I also have some past in international relations. I was a country representative of Austria in the United Nations in Geneva. But then I really got into, actually my brother, he's an AI engineer or machine learning engineer, and he really triggered my interest in the topic, and we decided to start a company ourselves. So now I am CEO and co-founder of Taxtastic, and I will talk about it a bit later. Just to give you an idea on how we actually implement AI and how we do it. And also, before I continue, I want to say thank you to my previous speaker, because funnily, I think it's almost as if we coordinated our presentations. So I don't think there's much of repetition, but there's a lot that is very helpful for my presentation. Yeah, then just to continue with myself, I'm also ambassador for Women in AI in Austria. So Women in AI is a global NGO counting more than 8,000 members all over the world. I think currently we represent more than 140 countries. And what we do is we believe that there is a big need for diversity in the field of AI, but unfortunately women are still very underrepresented. And so we try to actually engage girls and women in the technology and try to trigger the interest, but also we are very vocal to show some shortcomings and potential of discrimination of the technology. In Austria, we also founded our NGO, our Verein, Women in Artificial Intelligence Austria, and we are very active when it comes to commenting on laws, regulations that are coming up on European Union level. So there is a lot that is going on. There was recently the AI Act of the European Commission presented. It's a very interesting document, but there are also other laws that are on Austrian level or on European level that are very interesting, as the Digital Markets Act or Services Act. And we are very active in advocacy in this regard. And then, last but not least, next to my real job as CEO, I'm also having 2 teaching engagements. I am teaching at the IMC Krems, which is an applied university, basically in the bachelor's degree of informatics. And I am teaching critical algorithmic thinking and reflections on computer science and society. And I'm also teaching at the FH Gießen, which is another private university, where I'm focusing on legal and ethical aspects of trustworthy AI. Yeah, so I want to give you a bit of an overview of what is happening in Austria currently in the field of artificial intelligence. So we have, thanks to Enlight AI, which is a consultancy and research company who work a lot with reinforcement learning, which is one special method of artificial intelligence or machine learning, where basically an agent, a machine, learns to learn something by itself. And this was mentioned before also with AlphaGo, the game in 2016, which had a breakthrough and actually won against the world champion. So this system was still playing against a human, but then they said, you know what, let's try to have the system simply play against itself, and it even became almost indefeatable, or it became indefeatable even. So it's one method of basically learning without feeding explicit training data is more learning by doing. And this could be also applied in self-driving cars, for example. But the problem is that you can't just actually learn by experience. Say, oh, now I just hit the pedestrian, so this was a bad reward, and I shouldn't do it again because it's too dangerous. And so there is a lot of research going on in this field, and in the direction of creating virtual environments and testing simulations where these systems can be trained for the real world. Yeah, and so these NLive AI, they yearly publish the AI landscape, and as you can see here, there is quite something going on in Austria, and I'm very proud to be included on the upper right-hand side as Taxtastic, and also as Women in AI. We made it into the landscape, and also the founder of NLive AI, Clemens Wasner, he's also the head or one of the founding members of AI Austria. Then I also just highlighted here is etwas ein Person, we are also engaged, and I also wanted to mention two other startups that have managed to get some international recognition. So on the one hand, there is NLive. They are doing a lot of OCR and computer vision, and I think they have quite some projects also in the United States. And most recently, also Mostly AI became very famous because they actually synthesize data. So they create artificial data, which is then no problem when it comes to GDPR. Yeah. Also, AI Austria, so the one NGO I mentioned beforehand, is organizing yearly the Applied AI Conference, which has gained significant traction. It is also supported by the Austrian Trade Commission. And so last year it counted more than 1,600 participants. It's really an amazing event with also great networking opportunities. So if you're interested, they usually do this in the digital sphere, also matchmaking, and it's a great way to get to know AI experts and dive into the most applied topics. I also wanted to mention one initiative that is very, or became also very famous. So Vienna is trying to position itself as a capital of digital humanism, and this is an initiative that was also started from the Technical University in Vienna. And we have the Vienna Manifesto on Digital Humanism. So I also linked all the slides. So if you press later on the slides, you can find actually the links to the initiatives. And there is also a YouTube channel. So basically the idea is that technology, as was said beforehand, needs to be created for us humans, and it should in no way actually interfere with our rights. And it should be compliant to all standards and live up to our human expectations, basically. So very interesting initiative. And then finally, with I think 3 years of delay, we made it to publish our Austrian AI strategy. And unfortunately, it was a big disappointment. So I'm talking about the good things and the bad things, obviously, in this talk. So it was a big disappointment for the Austrian AI community. And actually, it was rather like a listing of potential use cases or existing use cases. It was really criticized for not investing into AI research as such, just highlighting these application fields. It really lacks also this idea of budget needed to position Austria as a big player in this field. And also, that many countries started to have AI centers of excellence, AI research centers, and unfortunately there is nothing in this plan to have like this AI center Austria being established. So one person who is who criticized a lot also this report is one of the godfathers of AI, and luckily we have him in Austria, in Linz actually, and he is Professor Sepp Hochreiter. He invented in the 90s a technology that is long and short-term memories, And actually it is used in many AI applications such as Google Voice Assistants, for example. And so he's heading the Institute of Machine Learning in Linz, and he was also outraged by the AI strategy. And he actually says that he has like all this great potential that even Google came to him, begging him or asking him to open like this research center, and he had to reject it because it was not supported on the Austrian level. And so he's actually German, by the way, so he's from Munich, but we have him here in Austria, and he is very famous, and he's also one attraction point, but he's criticizing that many students come to study at his institute, but then again they leave they're just required or like just hired by Google, and that there is not enough competitive environment. So also, I didn't find this now, but as far as I know, so his paper on long and short-term memory is the most cited machine learning paper or AI paper that is out there. So he's really one of the most famous people, as we have him here in Linz. Yeah, and then just to talk about, I just wanted to give you a very quick idea of what we're doing in Taxtastic. So we are an AI featured expense classification for tax declarations. And how do we do it, or what is the problem? So the problem is to actually say or judge whether an expense for an individual or a small company is tax relevant. It is not enough to say, okay, I'm going to look at a bank transaction, because from there you can't really tell much. Also, you can say everything coming from Amazon is going to be tax relevant or not. And you can't say any book you buy is going to be relevant for your tax declaration. So what you need to do actually is a case-by-case analysis. So you really need to look into the person who is the taxpayer. So I just took myself as an example, and looking at myself, I am CEO of Taxtastic, obviously. So just looking at the transaction, I can't tell much, or just the supplier. Actually, you need to look at what did I buy. And so looking at the individual products, you can see, like, for example, if I bought 2 books, one is the summer recipes. This means for me as CEO of a company, it would not be tax relevant. But the lean startup as a company founder is definitely tax relevant. So basically that's what our algorithm does. It is, as mentioned before, natural language processing. And first we look actually with computer vision. So we use already existing computer vision to read out receipts, which is still not working perfectly. So there's still problems in reading out receipts in 2021, which for me is always surprising because it's such a standardized thing, but in the end it's not that standardized at all, and there is no European standard of receipts, and so it's still a big challenge. Also having a very complex mathematical challenge, the table problem, actually reading out the lines, even if receipts are captured in different ways. But so we do this with OCR computer vision, and then our natural language processing comes in. It looks really like in every single product that was bought, and then, okay, what are those products? And then also the same for one transaction, and then we link these products to the individual user, and then determine on whether or not an expense is tax relevant, and in which tax category to classify it. So, as was mentioned before, classifying is a typical approach or something that AI can do. Then I just wanted to quickly mention that there is not one definition of AI that is globally recognized. This new European Act on Artificial Intelligence, it has a very broad definition. So some criticize it that it's too broad, some, especially NGOs criticizing that it's too narrow. And basically the European Union definition also includes everything that is logic-based, but to the end user seems like an intelligent system. And I just wanted to say, for the purposes of this talk, I like to think of AI as the capacity of a system to solve problems that we thought require human intelligence, and of machine learning, as also was explained beforehand, exactly the same capacity of the system to perform tasks that we think require human intelligence, but based on data. And so I wanted to highlight some problems with machine learning from the technology perspective. There are many business challenges as well, but from the technological perspective, there is this problem of transparency and explainability. As mentioned beforehand, deep learning was actually the basis of all this boom, and it is deep learning can also be said as neural network, and we talk about this intelligence and learning process because what was tried to, or what is done is basically compare the system to a human brain and think of how does it work and then reproduce it. So you have these artificial neural networks, and basically it can be said that this is deep learning, and that was really where the breakthroughs were. But they had a problem with transparency and explainability. So if you, for example, look at a simple picture classifier where you throw in pictures of dogs and wolves, the system can then learn to distinguish dogs from wolves. But the problem is that in this case, what happened was that the system started not classifying dogs and wolves, but rather, actually we don't even know. We don't know, was it classifying seasons, summer, spring, fall versus winter, or was it classifying snow? So we have a problem of really knowing what the system did. And that's because that's what it kind of a very, very simple neural network looks like. So basically, you see, it's even called, you have different layers in the system, and you have these hidden layers. So you throw in data, and so basically you design the architecture, then you look for the data you want to throw in, and you define the expected classifying outcome. In our case, the text categories like professional literature, educational material, and so on. And then you throw in the data and label it so that the system then learns itself. But the problem is, we don't always know what the system is doing, and if a system takes decisions that affect our lives, we have a right, also under GDPR, to know why a system came up with a certain decision. And so this is one of the problems. Also, many businesses don't want to give out the information for confidentiality or for not showing basically their trade secrets. The second big problem is bias in AI that can lead to discrimination in the real world. So there are many human rights, by the way, or maybe most of them, that can be affected by automated decision making. But the most prominent one is really discrimination. And so I just wanted to highlight an example that is already corrected by now. So you can see Turkish, for example, is a gender-neutral language. So you can't, you don't have a she or he, you only have O. And if you have here the example of she's a doctor and he's a nurse, and then you translate it into this gender-neutral language and retranslate it backwards, it automatically assumes that the doctor is the male and the man is basically the doctor and the woman is the nurse. And so now it has been corrected in the English version. But the German version, for example, if you do German, Turkish, and then Turkish, German, is still leading to the same, kind of biased outcome. And another example that is very famous is from a researcher of MIT, and it's in face recognition technology. So face recognition technology still performs very poorly when used on dark-skinned women. And for example, as you can see here, so Joy actually she trained the system for research purpose, but then she realized she had to put on a white mask so that the system could actually recognize her face. And I mean, this really can have very severe implications because used by police, for example, identifying suspects for criminal offenses, it would mean, so currently these systems have still an error rate about 35% when applied on darker skinned women, and this could mean that every third black woman could be watched or shadowed by the police wrongly, which really has severe implications. And then just to finish, one very negative example directly from Austria. So the Austrian unemployment agency, the IMS, or the job-seeking agency, came up with this idea of doing or having an algorithm predicting the integration chances of job seekers, and then focusing on the ones that have the highest potential to be reintegrated. And how they did it was actually feeding in factors like residency, gender, caretaking obligations, origin. So all these factors were used to determine on whether or not actually it's worth investing in a human to reintegrate them. And on the right-hand side, you can really see that, for example, if you have gender female, you got a minus 0.14. If you are age group 30 to 49, you get minus 30. If you're age group minus 50, you get minus 70. If you are, for example, if you have a handicap, you get minus 67, and so on. And so this algorithm was claimed by many to be discriminatory, and in defense, actually, to these offenses, one of the board members actually said, our system is just replicating the reality, and the system cannot discriminate. And unfortunately, this is the third problem, or the consequence of this problem, that we assume that machines are neutral because they are simply like a technology that is free of all these ideas of human beings, but that's not the case, because all these systems are made by human beings. So we are the ones who create the architecture, we are the ones who define the outcomes, and the data we feed in is data generated by us humans, and also labeled and sampled by us humans. And so there is a big risk of actually reproducing our societal biases, and then having this assumption that machines are neutral, and then replicating through machines these biases leading to discrimination, and even to it can even lead to a more acceptance of discrimination because of this assumption of machine neutrality. And with these words, I want to say thank you for having me, and I'm looking forward to a few questions, and I hope I didn't talk too long.